Hello and welcome back to Regaining the Balance. Today we're going to do a little video about dragons. So hope you guys are ready for that. It's going to be an interesting video today. We're doing this because or when we were reading the document about the St. Felix flood, there was that extra part that talks about a dragon flying in the air for many that you can see for many leagues. Let me go ahead and do a screen share here with you guys. There we go. And as you can see, plusieurs lieux, un dragon volant en l'air, faisant grand bruit. Yep. There's a dragon, a flying dragon making a lot of noise and darkening the sky. And here we are, the translation of that here. He has shown signs and prophecy of our coming future. Looks like I made a spelling mistake there. Like not long ago, that flying dragon that you can see over a few leagues making a lot of noise, darkening the sky. Ooh. So yeah, let's get into dragons. I found this website which put together this really interesting blog talking about different occurrences in dragons throughout history. As you can see, it says dragons in history, and of course all these links will be in the description box for you guys. So yeah, let's get to it. Let's go ahead and read this. Dragons in history. The dragons of legend are strangely like actual creatures that have lived in the past. They are much like the great reptiles which inhabited the earth long before man is supposed to have appeared on earth. Dragons were generally evil and destructive. Every country had them in its mythology. And he cites this guy at the World Book Encyclopedia, 1973. The article on dragons in the Encyclopedia Britannica, 1949 edition, noted that dinosaurs were astonishingly dragon-like, quote unquote, even though its author assumed that those ancients who believed in dragons did so, quote, without the slightest knowledge, unquote, of dinosaurs. The truth is that the fathers of modern paleontology used the term dinosaur and dragon interchangeably for quite some time. In his 1828 American Dictionary of the English Language, Noah Webster sought out the derivation of the word dragon among the ancient medieval roots. He concluded, quote, hence I infer that the word originally signified a shooting meteor in the atmosphere, a fiery meteor, and hence a fiery or flying serpent, from a root which signified to shoot or draw out, unquote. His first definition of the word dragon was, quote, a kind of winged serpent much celebrated in the romance of the Middle Ages, unquote. Webster Daniel, American Dictionary of the English Language, 1828, page 67. Stories of dragons have been handed down for generations in many civilizations. No doubt many of these stories have been exaggerated through the years, but that does not mean they had no original basis in fact. Even some living lizards look like dragons, and it is easy to see how a larger variety of such an animal could frighten the community. Have you ever seen an old dinosaur film where they used an iguana in a miniature town to create the illusion of a great dragon? Maybe I have. In 2004, a fascinating dinosaur skull was donated to the Children's Museum of Indianapolis by three Sioux City, Iowa residents who found it during a trip to the Hell Creek Formation in South Dakota. The trio are still excavating the site, looking for more of the dinosaur's bones. Because of its dragon-like head, horns, and teeth, the new species was dubbed Dracorex hogwartsia. I wonder if we could just quickly look that one up. Interesting. Gnarly. Oh, okay. There we go. This name honors the Harry Potter fiction works, which features the Hogwarts school and recently popularized dragons. The dinosaur skull mixes spiky horns, bumps, and a long muzzle, but unlike the other members of the Pachycephalosaur family, which have domed foreheads, this one is flat-headed. Consider some of the ancient stories of the dragons, some fictional and some that might be authentic history of dinosaurs. Written about 2000 BC, the famous Epic of Gilgamesh records the slaying of the monster Humbaba in Mesopotamia. Humbaba was the terrifying guardian of the cedar forest of Amanus. The powerful Mesopotamian god Enlil placed Humbaba there to kill any human that dared disturb its peace. Humbaba was a giant creature terrifying to look at. Sometimes he is pictured as a large humanoid shape covered with scale plates. His powerful legs were like that of a lion, but with the talons of a vulture. His head had bull horns, and his tail was like a serpent. Alternatively, some sources give Humbaba the form of a dragon that could breathe fire. Daniel was said to kill a dragon in the apocryphal chapters of the Bible. King Cyrus challenged Daniel's refusal to worship the idol Bel. Daniel revealed to the king a conspiracy on the part of the priest to eat the food offered to Bel, making the god seem real. Not only were the deceptive priests executed, but Daniel was allowed to destroy their idol and a dragon that was being worshipped in the brief narrative of the dragon. And I guess this is in the apocryphal chapters of the Bible. I don't even tell you. Daniel killed the dragon by baking pitch, fat, and hair to make cakes that caused the dragon to burst open upon consumption. In the Hebrew Midrash version, other ingredients serve the purpose of destroying the dragon. After Alexander the Great invaded India, he brought back reports of seeing a great hissing dragon living in a cave. Later, Greek rulers supposedly brought dragons alive from Ethiopia. Gould, Charles, Mythical Monsters, W.H. Allen Company, 1886, pages 382 to 383. Might have to look that one up. Microsoft Encarta Encyclopedia Dinosaur entry explains that the historical references to dinosaur bones may extend as far back as the 5th century BC. In fact, some scholars think that the Greek historian Herodotus was referring to fossilized dinosaur skeleton eggs when he described griffins guarding a nest in Central Asia. Dragon bones mentioned in the 3rd century AD texts from China are thought to refer to bones of dinosaurs. Ancient explorers and historians like Josephus told of small flying reptiles in ancient Egypt and Arabia and described their predators, the ibis, stopping their invasion into Egypt. 3rd century historian Gaius Solinus discussed the Arabian flying serpents and stated that the, quote, poison is so thick that death follows before pain can be felt. Ooh. Interesting. A condensed commentary and family exposition of the whole Bible. Interesting. Let me just make sure that the sound is going good here, guys. Okay. Yep. Looks like it's good. Turn it up a little bit. All right. The well-respected Greek researcher Herodotus wrote that there is a place in Arabia situated very near the city of Buto, to which I went on hearing of some winged serpents. And when I arrived there, I saw bones and spines of serpents in such quantities that it would be impossible to describe. The form of the serpent is like that of the water snake, but he has wings without feathers, and as like as possible to wings of a bat. And here we go. The Herodotus History, 1850, 75 to 76. This is a remarkable description of a pterosaur. In this 3rd volume, Herodotus goes on to tell how these animals could sometimes be found in the Arabian spice groves. He described their size, coloration, and reproduction. It seems that the venomous flying serpents were infamous for living in frankincense trees. When workers wanted to go gather the tree's incense, they would employ putrid smoke to drive the flying reptiles away. Note the illustration below on the right. Herodotus has been called the father of history because he was the first historian we know who collected his materials systematically and then tested them for accuracy. John Gortzen noted the Egyptian representation of tail veins with flying reptiles and concluded that they must have observed pterosaurs or they would have not have known to sketch this leaf-shaped tail. Okay, and this is from book, as you guys can see here. I'm not going to read that one out. Among serpents, we find some that are furnished with wings. Herodotus, who saw those serpents, says they had great resemblance to those which the Greeks and Latins called hydra. Their wings are not composed of feathers like the wings of birds, but rather like those of bats. They loved sweet smells and frequent such trees as bare spices. These were the fiery serpents that made so great a destruction in the camp of Israel. The brazen serpent was a figure of the flying serpent Seraph, which Moses fixed upon an erected pole. That there were much is most evident. Okay. Herodotus, who had seen those serpents, says they very much resembled those what the Greeks and Latins called hydra. He went on purpose to the city of Brutus to see those flying animals that had been devoured by the Ibidian birds. Below left is a sculpting of the Bator dragon. Reliable historical accounts tell of a dragon that was killed in the swamps of what is now Hungary about the year 1035. This fierce reptile had become the scourge of the countryside and was finally destroyed by some brave townspeople. Thereafter, the town became known as Bator, which means brave in Hungarian. The Báthory family, from whom the town became a royal family. Oh, okay. Period. Statues near the local Reformed and Catholic Church still commemorate this momentous accomplishment. 3 of the dragon's teeth were kept as mementos of the event. These relics, since lost, were memorialized as the center point of Báthory's seal that is still in use today. Above center is an image of the Wawel dragon erected during recent times. According to the legend, this dragon lived in a large cave under Wawel Hill in the early 8th century. The cave, which is today a popular tourist attraction, is on the banks of the Vistula River in Krakow, Poland. Wawel Cathedral is a 900-year-old Catholic church in the town that still proudly displays in a hanging bundle. I guess that's right here. It's like a couple of bones. In a hanging bundle, large bones which are rumored to have belonged to the local dragon. The oldest known account of the Wawel dragon story comes from the 12th century work by Wincenti Kadlubek. It tells how the lair of this oppressive reptile was located near what was then the capital of Poland. According to the Polish folklore, the dragon was finally killed by a poor cobbler's apprentice named Skuba, who cleverly offered the dragon a lamb stuffed with sulfur. Skuba was rewarded with the hand of the king's daughter in marriage because of act of deliverance. Charles Gould cites the historian Gesner as saying that in quote, in 1543, a kind of dragon appeared in Styria within the confines of Germany, which had feet like birds and wings after the fashion of a bat, with an incurable bite. He refers to a description by Scaliger, and I wonder if that's the same Scaliger. uh, we'll have to take a look at that. If it's Joseph Scaliger of the chronology, then very interesting. But yeah, I'll have to check that one out because I wonder if this is right here. If this little bit here is actually the part that they're talking about in. If they're talking about this in the document here, because it does talk about it appears over Germany, flying over Germany. So who knows? Interesting though. He refers to a description by Scaliger of a species of serpent 4 feet long and as thick as a man's arm, with cartilaginous wings pendant from the sides. He also mentions Brodius of a winged dragon which was brought to Francis, the invincible king of the Gauls, by a countryman who had killed it with a mattock near Sancton, I guess, and which was stated to have been seen by many men of approved reputation who thought it had migrated from transmarine regions by the assistance of the wind. States that whilst he resided in Paris, he saw 5 winged dragons in the William Museum. These were biped and possessed of wings so slender that it was hardly possible that they could fly with them. Cardin doubted their having been fabricated, since they had been sent in vessels at different times, yet all presented the same remarkable form. Bellonius states that he has had He had seen whole carcasses of winged creatures, or dragons, carefully prepared, which he considered to be the same kind as those which fly out of Arabia into Egypt. They were thick about the belly, had 2 feet and 2 wings, whole like those of a bat and a snail's tail. Mythical Monsters, 1886. Cool. You know what? We could probably find a lot of these books. I think I'm going to want to try to look this one up. Sounds like a cool one. The Italian historian Aldrovandus also claimed to have received in the year 1551 a true dried Ethiopian dragon, a watercolor of which appears on the left at first glance. One is tempted to agree with Gould that the wings are ridiculously small. But perhaps in transporting from Ethiopia the wings broke off or disintegrated and thus had to be added from the artist's imagination. The positioning of the wings and the legs is also wrong unless the legs are actually the forelimbs, in which case the wings would be incorporated into the limb and the legs are actually missing. The first century Greek historian Strabo, who traveled and researched extensively through the Mediterranean and Near East, wrote a treatise on geography. He explained that in India, quote, there are reptiles 2 cubits long with membranous wings like bats, and that they too fly by night, discharging droppings of urine or also of sweat, which putrefy the skin of anyone who is not on his guard, unquote. Strabo accounts Strabo's accounts may have been based in part on the earlier works of Megasthenes, who traveled to India and state that there are, quote, snakes, ophis, with wings, and that their visitations occur not during the daytime but by night, and that they emit urine, which at once produces a festering wound on any body in which it might happen to drop. Sounds like the movie Aliens. The Chinese have many stories of dragons. Their traditional New Year celebration has its root in a story about a monster called Nian, a nocturnal beast that was half dragon and half lion. The Nian would attack, yeah, I think it means attack, ancient villages and would only be driven off with loud noises like fireworks. The bright red decoration and bright red decorations. Books even tell of Chinese families raising dragons to use their blood for medicines and highly prizing their eggs. To the right is a picture. Yeah. To the right is a picture of a fossilized Chinese dinosaur egg compared to a chicken egg. Marco Polo wrote of his travels to the province of Karajan and reported on huge serpents which at the fore part have 2 short legs, each with 3 claws. The jaws are wide enough to swallow a man, the teeth are large and sharp, and their whole appearance is so formidable that neither man nor any kind of animal can approach them without terror. Marco Polo goes on to describe how the local citizens of the area hunted and killed these creatures. He noted that the reptiles were nocturnal, assisted by eyes larger than a loaf, dwelling in caverns during the day to avoid the heat after they had killed their prey. Polo wrote that they would find a water source such as a lake, spring, or river. Their massive bodies left deep impressions in the paths as if a heavy beam had been drawn along the sands. Since the creatures predictably followed the same rutted paths, the native buried large wooden stake tips with sharp iron spikes which they could cover with sand. Apparently, these spikes so severely wounded the creatures that they died soon thereafter. 2-legged dragons are portrayed in ancient Chinese art like the white carved jade dragon on the right that is part of the Genesis Park collection. They are also known from other cultures, see below. Some of the Chinese dragon art is remarkably like dinosaurs, though often the dragons display an unrealistic, narrow trunk, more serpent like. It is interesting that the 12 signs of the Chinese zodiac are all animals, 11 of which are still alive today, but is the 12th, the dragon, merely a legend, or is it based on a real animal or a dinosaur? It doesn't seem logical that the ancient Chinese, when constructing their zodiac, would include one mythical animal with 11 real animals. The interpretation of dinosaurs as dragons goes back more than 2,000 years in Chinese culture. They were regarded as sacred, as a symbol of power. Shown to the top left is a dragon. Click to enlarge. That was cast in red gold and embossed during the Tang Dynasty. I guess it's this one. Notice the long neck and the tail, the frills, and the lithe stance. Shown above in the middle is a ferocious Ming Dynasty dragon statue that is part of the Barakat Gallery collection. China's oldest known dragon depiction is a curious discovery found at the ancient Zishuipo cemetery ruins along the Yellow River in Henan province. See the right. There, 3 artistic dragons, along with tigers and other animals composed entirely of white shells, were placed alongside human remains. No doubt this indicates the burial place of some very important rulers from the beginning of Chinese culture. The Zishuipo site dates back several thousand years, yet the dragons shown are surprisingly like modern renditions. This shows the dragon concept did not slowly develop through Chinese history from a simplistic, primitive mythological figure. This would make sense if they were in fact modeled after living creatures. The book Zusuan tells the narrative of how the ancients raised dragons and how the state used the services of 2 clans known as the Dragon Rearers and the Dragon Tamers. Sounds something straight out of Game of Thrones or something. Historical records tell of a Song Dynasty emperor who raised dragons with his palace compound. Huangdi, the mythic Yellow Emperor, was said to make sacrifices at the summit of Taishan after driving there in a chariot harnessed to 6 dragons. Interesting. Ming Dynasty Chinese landscaper painter Wu Bin served for a time as the emperor's secretary. Among his paintings is a piece entitled 18 Arats, an ink and color hand scroll showing Chinese dragons pulling carts, but the mythical quality to Wu Bing's work suggests that dragons had become extinct by his time, hundreds of years after the Song Dynasty. During medieval period, the Scandinavians described swimming dragons, and the Vikings placed dragons on the front of their ships to scare off the sea monsters. The one pictured on the right is based upon the 1734 sighting by Hans Egede as a missionary to Greenland. Egede was known as a meticulous recorder of the natural world. Numerous such stories have been recorded from the age of sailing ships, 1500 to 1900 AD, when sailors plied the seas much more quietly than in today's large motorized craft. The oldest reliable sea serpent record we have was set down by Olaus Magnus in his book Historiae de Gentibus. The story describes a Catholic priest who was exiled from his Swedish homeland and saw a sea monster of astonishing size, about 23 meters or 75 feet long, that was sighted in 1522 near an island named Mu. Magnus' credibility is attested by his most famous work in the 1539 book Carta Marina, which presented the most accurate map of Scandinavia or any other European region in existence at the time. A series of drawings on the map presents various monsters of the sea. The most notorious of these is a creature named the sea orm, but best known as Olaus's sea serpent. It was colored bright red, despite being described as black. The drawing shows it coiled around a Norman ship devouring a crew member who was unlucky enough to get close to its gaping maw. There you go. See it? All right. Hoost. Trying to figure out where some of these other spots are here. I don't know. The familiar legend of St. George slaying a dragon is prolific throughout European art and history. Likely it has some basis in fact. St. George is the patron saint of England, though the actual story was brought from the east by the Crusaders. Indeed, the dragon pictured to the right is the dinosaur Baryonyx, whose skeleton has been found throughout Europe. The famous in the annals of British literature is the poem of Beowulf, Famous in the annals of British literature is the poem of Beowulf, the heroic Norse warrior who killed a number of dragons. In the end, he died in the process of vanquishing the winged dragon. Dragons were even described in reputable zoological treatises published during the Middle Ages. For example, the great Swiss naturalist and medical doctor Conrad Gesner published a 4-volume encyclopedia from 1516 to 1565 entitled Historiae Animalium. He mentions dragons as, quote, very rare but still living creatures, unquote. The story is told of a 10th century Irishman who encountered a large clawed beast having iron on its tail, which pointed backwards. It had a head similar to a horse, but also had thick legs and strong claws. Could this have. Excuse me. Could this have been a surviving Stegosaurus? The great dinosaur mystery solved. And of course, there's this, the famous Stegosaurus picture from Angkor Wat. Oh, there's gonna be another one, guys. Excuse me. Who knows? Some people say it's not a Stegosaurus. Some people say it is a Stegosaurus. Who knows? Ulysses Aldrovandus is considered by many to be the father of modern natural history. He traveled extensively, collected thousands of animals and plants, and created the first ever natural history museum. His impressive collections are still on display in Bologna University, the world's oldest university, where they attest to his scholarship. His credentials give credence to an incident that Aldrovandus personally reported concerning a dragon. The dragon was first seen May 13th, 1572, hissing like a snake. It had been hiding on the small estate of Master Petronius. At 5 p.m., the dragon was caught on a public roadway by a herdsman named Baptista near the hedge of a private farm, a mile from the remote city outskirts of Bologna. Baptista was following his ox cart home when he noticed the oxen suddenly come to a stop. He kicked them and shouted at them, but they refused to move and went down on their knees rather than move forward. At this point, the herdsman noticed a hissing sound and was startled to see this strange little dragon ahead of him. Trembling, he struck it on its head with his rod and killed it. Aldrovandus surmised that the dragon was a juvenile, judging by its incompletely developed claws and teeth. The corpse had only been 2 feet and moved both by slithering like a snake and by using its feet. He believed there are small 2-legged lizards that do this today. The middle picture is hilarious looking. There we go. Aldrovandus mounted the specimen and displayed it for some time. He also had a watercolor painting of the creature made. See upper right. Here you go, right here. Perhaps these 2-legged snake-like dragons had been known for some time in medieval Europe. The 13th century statue of Eve and the serpent displayed at Reims, at Reims, my bad. Oh, I've been there. Too bad I didn't see this. Reims Cathedral and Palais du Tau, below right. Or maybe I haven't been there, actually. Oh, okay. No. Displays the same 2-legged dragon motif. It is interesting to note that the 2-legged dragons have also been depicted in ancient Acambaro art found in Mexico and Chinese art. In medieval times, scientifically minded authors produced volumes called quote-unquote bestiaries, compilation of known and sometimes imaginary animals accompanied by a moralizing explanation and fascinating pictures. One such volume is the Aberdeen Bestiary, written in the early 1500s and preserved in the library of Henry VIII. Along the newt, the salamander, and various kinds of snakes is the description and depiction of the dragon. The dragon is bigger, quote, the dragon is bigger than all other snakes or other living things on earth. For this reason, the Greeks called it Drakon. From this is derived its Latin name, Draco. The dragon, it is said, is often drawn forth from caves into the open air, causing the air to become turbulent. The dragon has a crest, small mouth, and narrow blowholes through which it breathes and puts forth its tongue. Its strength lies not in its teeth, but its tail, and it kills with a blow rather than a bite. It's free from poison. They say that it does not need poison to kill things because it kills anything around which it wraps its tail. From the dragon, not even the elephant with its huge size is safe, for lurking on paths along without which elephants are accustomed to pass, the dragon knots its tail around their legs and kills them by suffocation. Dragons are born in Ethiopia and India, where it is hot all year round. Flavius Philostratus, the 3rd century historian, provided his sober account. Quote, "The whole of India is girt with dragons of enormous size. For not only the marshes are full of them, but the mountains as well, and there is not a single ridge without one. Now the marsh king are sluggish in their habits and are 30 cubits long, or the marsh kind are sluggish in their habits and are 30 cubits long, and they have no crests standing up on their heads." Pliny the Elder also referenced a large dragon in India in his natural history. St. John of Damascus, an Eastern monk who wrote in the 8th century, gives a sober account of dragons, insisting that they are mere reptiles that do not have magical powers. He quoted from Roman historian Dio, who chronicled the Roman Empire in the 2nd century. It seems Regulus, a Roman consul, fought against Carthage when a dragon suddenly crept up and settled behind the wall of the Roman army. The Romans killed it, skinned it, and sent the hide to the Roman Senate. Dio claimed the hide was measured by order of the Senate and found to be 120 feet long. It seems unlikely that either Dio or pious St. John would support an outright fabrication involving a Roman consul and the Senate. Anglo-Saxon Chronicle gives a dire entry for the year 793. In those days, it was, quote, "In those days it was common to take glowing flying dragon activity as an omen of evil to come. This year," unquote, "this year came dreadful forewarnings over the land of the Northumbrians, terrifying the people most woefully. These were immense sheets of light rushing through the air, and whirlwinds and fiery dragons flying across the firmament." That kind of sounds like a comet. Reliable witnesses report of flying dragons in Europe are recorded around 1649. Another early account of a dragon comes from the remarkable book Chronicles of Johannes de Trocolo and Henrici de Blanford, held in the British Museum. This book describes an encounter with a dragon in the eastern part of England, Suffolk County, in 1405. A loose translation of the Latin is, quote, "Close to the town of Burris, near Sudbury, there has lately appeared, to the great hurt of the country, a dragon, vast in body, with a crested head, teeth like a saw, and a tail extended to an enormous length. Having slaughtered the shepherd of the flock, it devoured many sheep. In order to destroy him, all the country people were summoned. But when the dragon saw that he was again to be assailed with arrows, he fled to a marsh or mere, and there hid himself among the long reeds, and was no more seen. In 2012, an artistic representation of the Burris dragon was made out of the white rocks on grassy hillside about 1.5 miles out of the town. The Welsh have numerous historical accounts of flying serpents. The woods around Penllyn Castle, or Glamorgan, sorry, had the reputation of being frequented by winged serpents, and these were the terror of old and young alike. An aged inhabitant of Penllyn, who died a few years ago, said that in his boyhood the winged serpents were described as very beautiful. They were coiled when in repose, and looked as if they were covered with jewels of all sorts. Some of them had crests sparkling with all colors of the rainbow. When disturbed, they gilded swiftly, sparkling all over, to their hiding places. When angry, they flew over people's heads with outspread wings, bright and sometimes with eyes, too, like the feathers in a peacock's tail. He said it was no old story invented to frighten children, but a real fact. His father and uncle had killed some of them, for they were as bad as foxes for poultry. The old man attributed the extinction of the winged serpents to the fact that they were, quote, terrors in the farmyards and coverts, unquote. Okay, interesting. Folklore and folk stories of Wales, 1909. That sounds kind of cool. As you guys know, I love old books, so We still have a couple of examples of medieval dragon booklets here. The Dragon Story, shown to the right, and Strange News out of Essex of the Winged Serpent. The prolific 17th century writer Athanasius Kircher's recorded how the nobleman Christopher Shoreham, perfect of the entire territory, prefect of the entire territory, wrote a true history and summarizing their all, for by that way he was able to confirm the truth of the things experienced, and indeed the things truly seen by the eye, written in his own words. Quote, on a warm night in 1619, while contemplating the serenity of the heavens, I saw a shining dragon of great size in front of Mount Pilatus, coming from the opposite side of the lake, or hollow, a cave that is named Fleu, Hogarth near Lucerne, moving rapidly in an agitated way, seen flying across. It was of a large size, with a long tail, a long neck, reptile head, and ferocious gaping jaws. As it flew, it was like iron struck and forged when pressed together that scattered sparks. At first, I thought it was another meteor from what I saw, but after I diligently observed it alone, I understood it was indeed a dragon from the motion of the limbs of the entire body. From the writings of the respected clergyman, in fact, a dragon truly exists in nature. It is simply established. 1664. Such bioluminescent nocturnal flying creatures are known in some religions still today. See the Ropin page. Might they not be the basis for the, quote, fiery dragon lore from ancient civilizations around the world? John Harris was a scientific man that edited the first encyclopedia. He gave singularly account of the capture of a dragon. Quote, we have in an ancient author a very large and circumstantial account of the taking of a dragon on the frontiers of Ethiopia, which was 1 and 20 feet in length, and was carried to Ptolemy Philadelphus, who very bountifully rewarded such as ran the hazard of procuring him the beast, unquote. This is Harriet Collection of Voyages. Ooh, this might be an interesting book, 1764. But this pales in comparison to the account of St. Ambrose gives of dragons, quote, seen in the neighborhood of the Ganges nearly 70 cubits in length, unquote, Ambrose de Moribus Bacmanorum, 1668. It was one of this size that Alexander and his army saw in a cave. Its terrible hissing made a strong impression on the Macedonians, who, with all their courage, could not help being frightened at so horrid a spectacle. A Western pioneer colonized tribal lands around the world. Reports of dragons continued to come back to Europe. It became standard practice for cartographers to identify the unexplored regions at the periphery of their maps with the cryptic words, here be dragons. That's probably what I should have named this video. But as civilization took hold, even in remote regions, the changes to the ecosystem and hunting down of predators took its toll on the remaining dinosaurian remnants. The 16th century Italian explorer Bagafetta, in a report of the Kingdom of Congo, described the province of Bemba, which he defined as, quote, on the sea coast of the river Ambries until the river Coanza towards the south, unquote, and says of the serpents, quote, there are also certain other creatures which, being as big as rams, have wings like dragons, with long tails and long chaps, and diverse rows of teeth, and feed upon raw flesh. Ooh, that sounds like a shark, like a great white shark. Their color is blue and green, their skin painted like scales, but they have 2 feet, but no more. The pagan Negroes used to worship them as gods, and to this day you may see diverse of them that are kept for a marvel. And because they are very rare, the chief lords there curiously preserve them, and suffer the people to worship them, which tendeth greatly to their profits by reason of the gifts and obligation which the people offer unto them. And it's 1745, the Harleian Collections of Travel. Author Charles Gould sought to dispel supernatural notions and give a sober account of the dragon. Quote, the dragon is nothing more than a serpent of enormous size, and they formerly distinguished 3 sorts of them in the Indies, vis-a-vis such as were in the mountains, such as were bred in the caves or in the flat country, and such as were found in the fens and marshes. The first is the largest of all, and are covered with scales as resplendent as polished gold. These have a kind of beard hanging from their lower jaw, their eyebrows large and very exactly arched, their aspect the most frightful that can be imagined, and their icy loud and shrill, their crests and their cry loud and shrill, their crest of a bright yellow, and protuberance on their heads of the color of of burning coal. Those of the flat country differ from the former in nothing but in having their scales of a silver color, and in their frequenting rivers, to which the former never come. Those that live in marshes and fens are of a dark color approaching to black, move slowly, have no crest or any rising upon their heads. The 17th century Bible scholar Samuel Bocart penned in an in-depth study of the animals in the Bible. He described how winged serpents are not only a thing of the Old Testament, but were alive in his day. If, quote, if on your travels you encounter the serpent with wings who circle and hurls himself at you, the flying snake, hide yourself because of its reputation. Lie down when the snake appears and guard yourself in alarm, for that snake's manner is to go away calm. Considering it a victory, there are winged and flying serpents that can be found who are venomous, who snort, and are savage and kill with pain worse than fire. 1794, there you go. On April 26, 1890, the Tombstone Epitaph, I bet you we could find this one, reported that two cowboys had discovered and shot down a creature described as a winged dragon, which resembled a pterodactyl, only much larger. The cowboy said its wingspan was 160 feet. What? And its body was more than 4 feet wide and 92 feet long. Huh. The cowboy supposedly cut off the end of the wing to prove the existence of the creature. The paper's description of the animal fits the Quetzalcoatlus, whose fossils were found in Texas. Huh. Could this be Thunderbird or Wakinyan, the jagged, winged, fierce-toothed flying creature of the Sioux American Indian legend? This Thunderbird supposedly lived in a cave on a mountaintop and feasted on seafood. Larger than an eagle, wanbli, or hawk, setam, and the Wakinyan was named because of its association with thunder and lightning, and supposedly being struck by lightning and seen to fall to the ground during a storm. It was further distinguished by its piercing cry and thunderous beating wings. Huh. I'm coming down to the end of this here. Evolutionary zoologist Desmond Morris wrote, "In the world of fantastic animals, the dragon is unique. No other imaginary creature has appeared in such a rich variety of forms. It is as though there was once a whole family of different dragon species that really existed, before they mysteriously became extinct. Indeed, as recently as the 17th century, scholars wrote of dragons as though they were scientific fact. Their anatomies and natural history had been recorded in painstaking detail. The naturalist Edward Topsell, for instance, writing in 1608, considered them to be reptilian and closely related to serpents. Quote, there are diverse sorts of dragons, distinguished partly by their countries, partly by their quantity and magnitude, and partly by the different form of their external parts. Quote, unquote. Unlike Shakespeare, who spoke of, quote, the dragon more feared than seen, unspoke, Topsell was convinced that they had been observed by many people. Quote, neither have we in Europe only heard of dragons and never seen them, but also in our own country, there have, by the testimony of sundry writers, diverse been discovered and killed, unquote, from the Ford to Carl Schucker's Dragons in Natural History, 1995. Evolutionist Adrian Mayer spent considerable time researching the possibility that Native Americans dug up dinosaur fossils, but some of the reports she received make a lot more sense if these early Americans interacted with actual dinosaurs or dragons, not yet extinct. There is no evidence for sophisticated ancient paleontologists. An old Assiniboine, sorry guys, an old Assiniboine story tells of a war party that, quote, traveled a long distance to unfamiliar lands and saw some large lizards. The warriors held a council and discussed what they knew about those strange creatures. They decided that those big lizards were bad medicine and should be left alone. However, one warrior who wanted more war honors said that he was not afraid of those animals and would kill one. He took his lance, a very old weapon used before horses, and charged one of the large lizard type animals and tried to kill it. But he had trouble sticking his lance in the creature's hide, and during the battle he himself was killed and eaten. Unquote. Excuse me. This story conjures up incredible visions of the scaly hide of a great reptile, something Native Americans would not know from mere skeletons. It was once thought that woolly mammoths had flourished in North America prior to the arrival of humans, but the discovery of sites where many mammoths were killed and butchered has established the coexistence of men and mammoths. Perhaps similar evidence involving dinosaurs will be forthcoming. And yeah, I guess I'll read the rest of this. The atheistic astronomer Carl Sagan once remarked, the pervasiveness of dragon myths in folk legends of many cultures is probably no accident. Indeed, he felt compelled to address the similarity to the great reptiles of the Jurassic era and explain them away. How could Sagan do this? Peter Dickinson stated, Carl Sagan tried to account for the spread and consistency of dragon legends by saying that there are fossil memories of the time of the dinosaurs come down to us through general mammalian memory inherited from the early animals, our ancestors who had to compete with the great predatory lizards. Thus, Carl Sagan believed that we evolved not merely our physical bodies, but also memories uploaded from our mammalian ancestors. I think that's just a dig there. So, how interesting, huh? Dragons in history. Like I said, lots of. If you guys want to go through this and, find all the different sources, because there's a lot of these books and accounts that are, in the 1500s. The book we were just I was just showing you guys in the last video about the St. Felix flood and dragon flying through the air, making making a lot of noise. Interesting. And then I had no idea so many much older historians actually referred to dragons as like Herodotus and Josephus and the like. But yeah, fascinating, huh? Who knew? But anyways, I thought I'd just quickly run through that article because why not? It actually had something to do with what we're sort of looking into. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. It was certainly an interesting read, and as you can see, the page here, this picture I found on the internet, and it's like Middle Ages depiction of like an army attacking a whole bunch of dragons. And they're weird because they all have these like weird like green, like I don't know what they are. These green things on their head, like iridescent or something. Very strange. But anyways, there you go. There be dragons. And even though these people, I appreciate the work that these people did. I think the guy's name is Dave, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, Dino Dave's blog. And I don't necessarily agree with some of the things that they definitely are very much into their how would you say it, interpretation of the Bible in a literal sense, which I am definitely not somebody who does that. But aside from that, I always appreciate, regardless if I disagree with anyone, I always appreciate the kind of work that they can throw up here like this, because this is cool. And they definitely did some research on this because they provided a whole lot of sources here that you could probably easily look up, especially all the stuff that's all the public domain stuff. So yeah, maybe I'll dig into some of that in the future. Maybe not. We'll see what happens. Otherwise, thank you for joining me today, guys. And please hit the like button and subscribe and share if you think other people would think this is kind of a cool subject that they might dig. Otherwise, much love to all of you. Thanks for stopping by, and I will see you guys on the flip side.